Also here tonight, former Hawaii Congresswoman and former presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. So, Tulsi, tell me, do you think that parents need to be concerned about heading to Gitmo?
Every American should be concerned about what's happening right now, Ben. This is something that's bigger than Democrats versus Republicans. What we're seeing here is about the powerful elite in this country using their power to try to silence and control us. What is so dangerous about this situation is we have the Attorney General essentially weaponizing our federal law enforcement agencies to intimidate and silence the American people, to try to silence us into compliance, essentially. And the reality is that, as you know very well, whether we disagree or agree with each other, whether our speech is quiet or obnoxious, our speech is protected by the First Amendment. It's something that I, as a soldier and as a member of Congress, took an oath to support and defend, the Constitution. And I may hate the speech that you say, I may completely disagree with it, but I will lay down my life to protect your right to say it.
One of the things that concerns me so much about this particular moment, Tulsi, is that it's not necessarily about the people who you hear about getting into fights over this, who actually have to go to court and defend themselves. It's about all the people who stay quiet because of the forces of the elite, because of big tech, because of big government being potentially used against them. They essentially are quelled into silence because they don't want to be at the end of that spear.
And that's why it's so important for us to stand up, to speak out, to fight back, to take a stand for our freedoms. The kind of action that we're seeing from Attorney General Garland, it makes our country look more and more like we're moving to a police state rather than being the land of the free. And so now is not the time to allow them to intimidate us into silence. Now is the time that we, the American people, really must take this stand for each other, for our civil liberties, for our freedoms, because unfortunately those who are in power, those who are supposed to be leading our country, rather than upholding our civil liberties and freedoms, these kinds of actions are violating and infringing upon them.
I know that you in Congress were one of the major voices pushing back against the assumption that we should just take for granted that our nation's intelligence, security, and law enforcement communities, that they just were, places that we should trust automatically. You wanted to see them have more oversight and more transparency because you felt that we needed to be more skeptical. That's not been something that I think traditionally a lot of Republicans listen to, but a lot more of them are listening to it now. What are some of the steps that we can take to have more confidence that we won't see a situation where things like the Department of Justice are being turned against our own law-abiding citizens?
Well, when you hear so easily in this specific example, the counterterrorism division of our government, the national security branch being invoked to target everyday Americans, to target these parents who, because they care so much for their children, are going and speaking out at these Board of Education meetings. When you see this happening, it should be a red flag being waved to every single person about the danger of these provisions that were passed in the Patriot Act after 9/11 to specifically go after al-Qaeda, the jihadist terrorists who attacked us on that day, now being redirected towards our neighbors, our friends, those in our community, our fellow Americans. And so we can only put a stop to this by continuing to shine a light on it, by holding lawmakers accountable so that these policy changes are made, so that these provisions in the Patriot Act are revoked. This is what I was working on in Congress, and we're seeing now exactly why it's so important.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time to join me tonight.
Thank you, Ben.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.